It's all within the frame, a constant guessing game.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Listen to the Vibes, and I'm very privileged to have Mr. Ian Danter here. He is a drummer, but he's put out a new album, and I got to listen to it, and really kind of took me back to my younger days in like the 70s and early 80s, and I really enjoyed it. So we're going to talk about that and get to know Ian a little better. So Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi Kyle. I'm an English boy. Lived all my life in England. I had delusions of grandeur when I was a boy of about 10 or 11 when I first heard Kiss Alive. And I decided at that point I was going to be a rock star. So those delusions of grandeur kicked in. I joined various original bands in the 80s and into the 90s that had varying degrees of minor success, but never got themselves a serious record contract or anything. And then subsequently I got into playing with UK tribute bands, a Bon Jovi one at first, but I did spend about 7 or 8 years playing drums for a Kiss tribute, which for a Kiss fan, you can imagine was just the best fun for me. So I was in this band called Dress to Kill, who were the world's longest running Kiss tribute, actually. They've been going nonstop since 1990, and they're still going now. But in amongst all that, as a songwriter, I always wanted to put my own songs down at some point, and I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play drums first, but I also play guitar and bass and keyboards, and I can sing too. So the album that you've been listening to, Rule of Three, is my third solo album inside a decade. My first one came out in 2013. That was called Prove You Wrong. A second solo album called Second Time Around came out in 2015. This one should have come out a little earlier, but like everybody else, life kind of got in the way the past couple of years. So, yeah. But it's here now.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and you had some big name people help you on this album, didn't you?
Oh boy, well, I'm so lucky because when it comes to my own, abilities as a musician, I know my limitations. So I'm fine as a rhythm guitar player, playing the parts that I want to play. But when it comes to soloing, I can solo okay, but some people I felt would have a better perspective on playing solos for certain songs than me. So I got people in like Chris Buck, who's one of the great up-and-coming British blues rock guitar players. If people aren't aware of Chris, he's got a couple of bands, one called Buck and Evans and another one called Cardinal Black, which is a really soulful blues band, well worth checking out. It's kind of roots, but it's kind of British roots music as opposed to American rootsy stuff. It's not Blackberry Smoke, Cadillac 3 sort of thing. It's almost more like Free, Bad Company sort of rootsy vibe going on.
Yeah.
I asked him because I've got to know him and I knew how talented he was, whether he would play a solo for me on a song called Landscapes. And my God, he delivered this most beautiful solo for me. Yeah. He's like a cross between Jeff Beck, Robin Trower, and Rory Gallagher. He's just got the soul of those three guys all rolled into one player. And as well as him, people like Sam Wood from Wayward Sons, who are a really good British rock band, led by the former Little Angels frontman Toby Jepson. Sam played a solo for me. Got some great backing vocalists to help me out. Yeah, it's been, when it got to that point when it came to guitar solos, Carl, I thought, okay, right, if I can't play what suits the song, let's get somebody decent in who knows what to do. And thankfully everybody delivered the goods for me, and I'm so pleased for what they've done for me.
Well, even though it doesn't sound exactly like him, respectfully, I have to say some of it reminded me of Aldo Nova.
Aldo Nova, oh yeah,
yeah.
Man alive. Now there's a name that Aldo never made it big over here in the UK.
Really?
Kerrang magazine used to write articles about him. But Aldo never, it's like there's certain about April Wine never made it big over here, and Aldo always seemed to be on the periphery, even though Kerrang magazine, which in the 80s was the Bible, and everybody bought it, and there were a lot of articles positive about Aldo. But yeah, thank you for that. I think I know where you're coming from when you hear that. Yeah. That hadn't occurred to me until you mentioned it.
Well, everybody attributes him just to that song Fantasy, but if you listen to some of his stuff, I mean, he's a really great guitarist. He's very talented. It seemed like right when I first started listening to the album, I had to make sure I didn't click on Aldo Nova by mistake.
Oh, well, I hope I've not nicked anything off him that he can sue me for. That would be entirely accidental if so. But well, thank you for that. I've heard lots of people give me lots of different ideas about the sounds and where it comes from. I've had people say I've heard people say Cheap Trick. I've had people say Kiss. I've had people say even Jellyfish, who are a great San Francisco band that never made it. But Landscapes, the ballad, people tell me it's got a Jellyfish vibe going on, and I'll happily take that because I love that band to the ends of the earth.
Well, I was also kind of thinking along the lines of like April Wine or Uriah Heep or something along that line. It's got that 70s sound to it, but it's still original.
It was in a way, Kyle, deliberate. Certainly in terms of the drum sounds, I get really frustrated when I listen to albums nowadays. It's drum sound 101. All the drums are triggered or they're produced to hell, and they all sound the same.
Yeah.
When I grew up and I was first getting into music and I was listening to my brother's albums, you would listen to Roger Taylor from Queen and you knew it was him drumming because of the sound of his kit and the way he played. Ian Pace from Deep Purple, you knew it was Ian Pace because of the way he played and the sound of his kit. Neil Peart from Rush, Brian Downey from Thin Lizzy, Cozy Powell in Rainbow. All these guys who were massive influences on me as a drummer, they all had a certain sound to their kit, a certain snap around the snare or ways that they played their toms or tuned their toms and things like that. And I feel that's gone. And when I got the chance to record this album, the first place I went to was a studio in Wales in Monmouth called Monnow Valley, where bands like Black Sabbath have recorded in the past. And it's got a beautiful live room, excuse me, and old vintage microphones. And I've got a nice DW drum kit, which is my pride and joy. I've had it for a good, 10, 15 years. And I just wanted it to sound like how it sounds when I play it live, rather than have it all triggered and produced to goodness knows what, and suck all the life out of those drums. So in fairness to the original engineer, Callum, who mixed or rather, mic'd the drums up and recorded them, when I first put those drum tracks down, he let the drums breathe. And that continued through to the mixing process where Tim Hamill, who was an absolute freaking genius in terms of mixing it all together and giving me the sounds I wanted in my head and put them there on the tracks. He continued that philosophy, let the drums, he said, look, these drums sound great. I don't want to touch them other than just, give them a bit of tonality and give them a bit of space. And thank the Lord for that, because that was all I really wanted. Some of my favorite albums have got brilliant drum sounds. You think of Moving Pictures by Rush and that amazing sound that Neil captured, which was quite a close sound. And then Creatures of the Night from Kiss, which has Eric Carr's massive, bombastic drum sound. Not that I wanted an album that was drum focused. I just wanted a good drum sound. And I think that was the basis of what you ended up listening to, Carl, what you ended up picking up from what you heard.
Well, the reoccurring theme with every musician I talked to lately has been all the stuff that seems to be popular. It sounds like it comes from a computer. It's sampled stuff. It's stuff, sounds that's already programmed in the computer that you can just, do yourself on there. You practically have a whole recording studio on your computer. I miss that live sound that comes from when you do a recording. I don't like this sampled stuff.
No, well, nor do I. When you, I think sometimes musicians sell themselves a little short in that it can be a shortcut to getting a song done quickly or matching a certain tonality that they've heard elsewhere that's current and kind of the moment, and that's fine. And different strokes for different folks. But for me, because I grew up listening to those albums where you felt there was a space between all the instruments, and bearing in mind I had to record this all piecemeal, Carl. I had to record the drums on their own with no accompaniment, just playing the arrangement as I remembered it, and then put the bass down over the top, and then the guitars, and then keyboards, and then acoustics and whatever. So it was all piecemeal, but at every single stage, Carla, I was mindful of the fact, right, when this goes down, it's got to be recorded in such a way that when we come to mix it, it's not going to sound cluttered, it's not going to sound incorrect, it's not going to sound like it doesn't fit with one another, all the parts don't fit. So I was conscious of that right the way through the recording process.
Do you feel like it's almost a catch-22 when it comes to the music world nowadays? And what I mean by that is it is easier for you to put something up on, say, Spotify, these other platforms, compared to the old days when you put out an album. I mean, it was all on record or pressed on a CD or on a cassette, 8-track, what have you. And you made a lot of money that way. And then you have that problem where you don't have that physical album in your hands. You got to make your money either merchandising or touring and that kind of thing. I mean, do you see that problem?
I see that problem. I come from a generation like you do where the album was the thing. And for us of our generation, it's difficult to leave that mindset. Although I appreciate that, yes, the new generation has a much better handle on how to utilize streaming services and put things out a bit more intermittently, not release an album's worth of material, but sort of drip feed material over time. I mean, the whole reason I started doing this, Kyle, was purely self-indulgent. It wasn't about thinking about making a million or becoming a world-renowned singer-songwriter. It was really about scratching an itch. It was really about having that frustration of never having recorded my songs properly, despite being in several good bands. Because normally, back in the day, you had a day in a studio. You were paying what, $25, $30 an hour to an engineer. You saved up as a band, and you had one day to get 4 songs done, and that's done. Recorded, vocals, the lot, mixed, cassette or tape in your hand to leave the studio with that night.
Yeah.
And so quality inevitably suffers, no matter how hard you rehearse. So that was why I wanted to do it in the first instance, and to still do the album format now, because you can still buy this on a CD. It's still available as a CD as well as on a download. It's just because I like the idea of a collection of songs if it's trying to put something across, a vibe, as you picked up on with what you've heard. But each to his own. If people want to put out 1 or 2 songs at a time as opposed to 10 or 11, fair play to you. I just know what works for me and what makes me happy.
Yeah, I talked to a musician not too long ago, and he'll put out a song here and there every once in a while, and you can buy it. It's like between, I don't know, 50 cents to $1.99, whatever. And I mean, he gets paid right away, but it's just something about having a whole collection. And I know they're trying to push vinyl again, because I go into a Walmart and you'll see these new artists with an actual vinyl record there. But let's face it, you can get on Spotify, you pay $10 a month, you could pull up whatever album you want and listen to it as many times as you want. I just really miss those days of going to that record store, buying the album, having that wonderful art inside and out, having that vinyl to put on the record. I miss the even hearing the little scratches every once in a while.
I wish that, well, some of the younger generation understand, because vinyl, as you say, has made a comeback. And, although apparently these days, vinyl's in short supply, and like the production of vinyl's getting quite difficult. Apparently raw materials are hard to get hold of, particularly in this country. I'm not sure whether that's a problem in the States, but yeah. Going back to Creatures of the Night, that Kiss album I love so much. I remember buying that in Birmingham city centre where I lived, taking it home, and I just remember putting the headphones on, a pair of headphones, not too dissimilar to the ones I've got on now, hit the needle dropping on that intro run as it goes into the title track, and just that sense of anticipation. It's magnificent. You can't. It's hard to describe, and it's hard to beat. And yeah, you get those little scratches and bumps and ruffles just as you're waiting for the first song to kick in. That was part of its charm. That was part of the excitement, I think. So yeah, some of that's been lost, but hey, you and I have got those memories, those wonderful memories of those albums that made us feel that way. And that's I wish the younger generation could experience what we did on a more regular basis.
Yeah. And I don't know what the equivalent is to the pound, but I remember spending like $5, $6, no more than maybe $8 on an album. And now you go, and I saw one the other day, they wanted almost $40 for it.
Yeah, that's about right. When I bought albums back in the 80s, it was normally about £5, which would be about $8 now, I guess. I don't know, maybe a bit less, because the pound against the dollar's pretty weak. But now, yeah, you're looking at vinyl at least £20, £25. And that's as much down to the fact that bands don't produce that many vinyl copies because they know they don't want to print too many. Otherwise, they're just going to be held with loads of leftovers. And so that scarcity bumps up the price a little bit, because the price breaks aren't as good for a band when they produce vinyl if they can only produce, let's say 1,000 copies. The price break they would get from the distributor is way better if they got 2,000 vinyl copies made, or 3,000. So those limited runs tend to mean the cost has to go up in order for them to make it worth their while. I didn't do vinyl for this release. That was one of the reasons that I knew I would have to spend a lot of money to get a minimum number done that may or may not sell, and may be too prohibitive for people to buy, because the price would have to be at a certain price point that puts people off, like, as you say, with $40 for a vinyl album over there right now.
You know what else I enjoyed about opening a record is when you'd find something like a poster or a lyric sheet or something. You never knew if you were going to get anything in one of those albums like that. What you bought Sgt. Pepper's, and I think they had little cutout dolls and stuff in it.
But I managed to get an import copy of Love Gun when I was just getting into Kiss, and it was the one with the pop gun. In the middle of it, And,
I've got it.
Yeah, UK releases of American albums tended to be, you never got the juicy stuff, but for some reason, and I didn't even realize when I bought it, I was only 10, what do I know, that it was an import copy of Love Gun, not a British, issue of the album. So I suddenly realized I got lucky. So yeah, those bonuses were always nice to have. So what I have done with this album, with Rule of Three, there is a really nice lyric booklet in the CD digipack that comes with it. All the lyrics are in there. Explains how the songs came to be. Steve Beebe, my friend from Kerrang! Magazine, has written some really nice liner notes. So whilst you can't offer anything and everything with CDs these days, you can go the extra mile to make sure that the booklet that people get is at least interesting.
They should have a little address they can put in those books that you can send off for a poster or something like that. That would be cool.
Yeah, some bands used to do that, but they were the exception rather than the rule.
We got that album Face Dances from the Who, and the poster that comes in it, I got a nice custom frame for it, and it's up in our house.
Nice.
And I'm gonna tell you what, man, even though it's a poster, it is a work of art. I missed that. I framed the ones that come in the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon. Let's see, what else did we do? The poster that come in the White Album. Remember you had the four faces, and then you also had the big poster with all the different pictures and stuff on it.
My brother's got the Peter Gabriel album where you got the scratch marks. I forget which one it was from his solo album. He's got a massive version of that, and it's wonderful. It's great, and he's got Technical Ecstasy, I think, as well on one of the walls in his house. My brother, and it looks blown up as well. It just looks fantastic, even more detail. Twice the size. It's album artwork is important, and the album artwork on this is I don't know whether you've seen the cover, Carl, but it's based on what you would call Hollywood squares.
Yeah, I did.
We call it celebrity squares over here in the UK, and because of threes, because you're going to get a row of three to win in celebrity Hollywood squares. And I've had all these famous musicians, some living, some no longer with us, dotted around me, who were all part of trios, threes. It's my third album, so that was another part of it. And I everyone's got their surname on the Hollywood square, except mine's fallen off, and I've spray painted my Christian name on there because I'm so self-conscious about nobody knows who the hell I am. So
yeah,
part of the fun.
You had Lemmy and Kurt Cobain, and Billy Gibbons, and Neil Peart.
And Les Claypool that catches a few people out, because certainly not many people in the UK know about Primus too much, but Les is a great genius.
I got to see Primus back in 2000, I think. Man, they put on a good show.
I saw them in a sweaty Birmingham club even earlier than that, when John the Fisherman was first a hit on Headbangers Ball, and they were playing it all the time. They came over to the UK with a band called the Limbo Maniacs and did a small club tour. So I got to see Primus in like a 300-400 capacity club in Birmingham in England. And wow. And then even weirder than that, about 3 or 4 years later, they came over to support Rush when they were touring Roll the Bones around Europe. And even though Primus are one of the weirdest bands out there, it suited the evening with Rush perfectly. Like the perfect combination. So yeah, Les is a genius.
And should have had Weller from the Jam on there.
Well, I thought about that. There were a few bubbling under, right? Because there's a number of great trios. Yeah, Weller was bubbling under, and a few others, but I was happy with the 8 that I picked in the end.
Yeah, are you a Jam fan?
I am a Jam fan. I mean, at the time they emerged, 1980, I wasn't a fan then, because as a horrible, bratty little 12-year-old kid, I liked my rock and my hard rock, my classic rock. And so anything new wave really had to get me, otherwise I was a little suspicious of it. But the more you listen to all Mod Cons and, the early Jam stuff, and just how important it was as a social thing, and Two Tone as well. The Specials were a brilliant British band. Ghost Town is one of the most evocative songs of the early 80s. If people haven't heard it, it's a haunting song about just how Britain become run down in the early 1980s. And Jerry Dammers, who was the Specials chief songwriter, he was such a clever man. And they wrote some real great social commentary, a bit like the Kinks had done, like in the 60s, writing about England in the 60s. There were bands like the Jam and the Specials, and even Madness in the 80s in this country that wrote quirky songs, but lyrically they were really interesting. Whilst at the time I was listening to Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, UFO, and listening to the new wave of Def Leppard, the new wave of British heavy metal bands, that had my attention at that point. But at some point when you mature and you grow older, you go back and you realize just how important bands like the Jam were.
Oh yeah, the In the City was my favorite album.
Yeah,
but and it's hard to pick an album that didn't have a good song on it. Every one of them were awesome. There's just so much good music out of the UK.
Well, the Jam also did that clever thing of not reforming. they're one of the few bands out there that haven't gone down that road, and I think Weller's got an awful lot to do with that. I think he understands and appreciates the value of leaving something where it is of that moment. And I think he still feels he's got a lot to say as a solo artist anyway. And Bruce and Rick, they went off and did a From the Jam band anyway. They just got another guy in to be Weller and just did, small club gigs and kept playing and kept themselves happy. So everybody, I think he's kind of happy in the end.
Well, you understand why, who Jim Brown is, right? The football player from the U.S. So he was at the top of his game when he walked away. And so you'll always be able to say, man, he was one of the best. So I understand, because let's face it, some of these bands will get back together and their music just sounds like crap.
It's I look at a band like Cheap Trick, who still make great music, and I really like their last album. One More Time, is it? I still love Xander's voice.
Yeah,
I still like their quirky nature, and on each album that they release, there's at least 2 or 3 songs you go, oh yeah, that's great. They're just having fun. You can just tell they're still enjoying the process of writing, and that's what I enjoy when it comes to albums like Rule of Three. The process, I suppose you call it, the process of writing, of having that joyous moment where it all comes together in your head, or on a crappy little demo you've done at home. That's it. Okay, now we're cooking on gas, and then you can get to that stage where you get to record it and properly, and you hear it coming together again as you imagined it in your head. There's few things better in life than realizing that song you heard in your head and you think, I reckon this could sound all right, and then you record it and it actually does, rather than sounding like crap. Yeah,
and you're kind of only as good as the last album you put out. For some bands, you put out that one that just sounds totally flat, you've ruined your reputation.
Yeah, and I understand why bands make albums when they've reformed. I understand that attraction, because they're trying to recapture something. The zeitgeist, that feeling they had when it was all for one for all in their early days, or the first time that band was together. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I can't blame them for trying, because there's always kind of that possibility that they write that song that connects. But if it doesn't connect, if an audience goes, you start playing new stuff and you say, that's great, can you play the classic, please? It's tough. It's tough for your established bands out there, because the audience isn't quite so forgiving about hearing new material. It's a really delicate balancing act, and there's only a few bands that can actually, or could actually, do that and integrate new material tour after tour after tour, and be allowed to do that by the audience, and be accepting of that. Rush is probably one of the best examples I can think of when it came to that.
I totally get what you're saying. Hey, how many backing vocalists did you have on the album?
Well, most of it's done by me, but Beth Blade from Beth Blade and the Beautiful Disasters, British band, she came in and sang some backing vocals for me. Jane Gould, who's just released an album called Forget Me Not, which is a great bit of British AOR, if you get a chance to hear that. She did some backups. Tanith Roberts, who sings with me in a theatre rock band that I play in called Leather and Lace, she did some backing vocals for me. And Mark Thompson Smith, who is the male singer in that band, he also sang with The Sweet and Praying Mantis and things like that. So I had 3 or 4 backing vocalists come in, but a lot of it I did myself. Whilst I had a week a couple of years ago up in a studio in Blackpool on the northwest coast of England, where I had a week where I had daytimes, and there was just this studio nearby the hotel I was staying in, so I was able to spend days in there getting the vocals done all in 1 week. But the female vocals adds a real lovely blend to it. The first track, One Over the Eight's got a nice call and answer chorus that I Really like a bit of, it's almost gospel, but not gospel in this. It's not a gospel song, but just the feel of that back and forth of the vocals and the backing vocals. And they were amazing. Those girls just did such a brilliant job for me.
There was one song, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. It almost sounded like the lead singer from Zebra for a little bit. And then I thought, it kind of sounds like a woman singing.
I wonder whether that's Generation Z, whether that's the song, because there are a couple of songs where there are a couple of female lead vocals that sit on their own, and Generation Z is one of those. That's Jane Gould, who I mentioned earlier, who has just released an album called Forget Me Not. That's probably the lady you're thinking of at that point. Yeah, she's great. She's well, you know, all the female singers I work with over here, they're just so good, and they just add so much color to the material, because I know I can't sing it like that.
Everything about this album is great. I really enjoyed it, and I have to say I appreciate you know, Billy James. He sends me this material. Some of it's not been released yet, but I get to hear it first.
Sure.
And they're not part of the norm. You can tell it's not manufactured from some corporation. It's originality. It takes me back. Some of it's like prog rock.
Yeah.
I really love that stuff. And in a world where, let's face it, everything's about the hip hop music and what have you, to be introduced into a generation that does like to hear stuff like this, I don't think y'all get pushed enough.
Maybe we don't, and I'm not too upset about that. I you know, because the album's out there for people to find, and I love those moments when people discover it almost completely by accident. And further to what I was saying about the booklet that comes with the CD, I'm really proud of the lyrics. You know, the whole package. I do spend a bit of time on lyric writing, because I don't want to be too cliched in any aspect of what I do, whether it's songwriting, and particularly when it comes to lyrics. I think you get the feeling that it's a bit of a throwaway for some bands. You know, if I've heard, you know, if I've told you once, I've told you twice, you know, listen to me, take my advice. Oh, Jesus, I've heard that rhyming couplet a million times. You know, it's Saturday night, I feel all right. Do you really, is that the best you can do? Is that really the best? Have you really thought about, you know, saying something? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be profound, but at least it can be entertaining rather than just be, you know, something that somebody else has said a million times before. So lyrically, I was trying to push myself to, you know, cover things that, even fun topics like 1 over the 8, the first track, which is basically about drinking, but it's all about, you know, 1 over the 8 is a phrase over here for, you know, I don't know whether that.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, 1 over the 8 means you've had, it's like one too many. It's like, you know, it's like you've had 8 pints and somebody gives you a 9th pint and you shouldn't be drinking it. You chuck it down the back of your neck anyway. So that's 1 over the 8. That's all about fun times in rock clubs when we were of an age where, you know, you felt indestructible, that you could drink as much as you wanted and nothing ever happened to you. And then suddenly you hit a certain age and you can't do that anymore. So 1 over the 8 is all about that. Pick a Side is very much a song about how everything's become so binary. You have to pick a side on any topic. You know, there's no room for nuance, it seems, anymore. You're either for something or you're against something. And if if that view opposes somebody else, then it just becomes an almighty scrap. And I don't get that. I think that there's not enough nuance in debate about all sorts of things, current affairs, life, sport, whatever. It's too binary. It's too polarized at either end of the spectrum. And there's no room for any debate in the middle. Mm-hmm. And that's where Pick a Side comes from. A lot of the phrases you hear in that song come from British talk radio shows, you know, where people ring up on a whole host of topics, you know, and some of those phrases you hear are phrases I've heard from callers and from talk show hosts about, all manner of different things. So, what else? Last Chance Wagon, the last song on the album, is all about the frustration of not making it and chasing different trends and being something musically or visually that you're not as a musician, because you think that's what you need to do to catch the zeitgeist and make it. So you're not being true to yourself. You're actually just following the herd because you think that's how it should be done. And this whole album is definitely not about following the herd, because, you know, an album like this that you mentioned, the vibe that it brings off is not of the moment. It's not the same as the bands that are selling, you know, hundreds of thousands of records right now. It's a homage to the sounds and the riffs and the hooks that I loved, that got me into rock music in the first place when I was a boy.
I wanted to say that even though it's very respectful to the music of the 70s and early 80s when it comes to real rock music, it's still, there's nothing cliche about it. You can tell that it's all you. You're not carbon copying any of these bands, but very, very respectful to them. And I really love the sound. I wished we got more of it. You know.
Well, there could be more to come. I mean, on this album, there's a few co-writes with a former bandmate of mine, Gray Ettrick. We were in a band called Shotgun Wedding together back in the late 80s, early 90s. We were kind of, we were thought of as Britain's answer to Skid Row and Love Hate. I seem to remember at the time. And I'd have taken that because I loved Love Hate. Geez, we saw them when they first came over here. But Graham is a really good riff writer. He's a guitar player, but he writes really good, choppy, snarly riffs that I couldn't come up with myself. But he inspires me. So the number of times when we're in a room together and we get the guitars out and we're jamming away, and he plays something, that little lightning in the bottle moment. It's, what was that? What did you just play there? So he plays it again. And I, of course, these days with phones, you can record it there and then, take it back home and listen to it. Oh, that marries really well with this bit that I've already got. And you experiment and things come off. So to have people like Graham around to bounce ideas off really helps the material and makes it sound the way you've heard it.
You know, something that I have noticed though, and it's really weird, but we were out on the river this weekend, and a bunch of the college kids, because the college campus is right there by the river, they're floating down, and I started seeing these guys with the mullets and all that.
Oh yeah.
And some of this generation is picking up on the stuff that I listened to when I was in junior high and high school. So there is a sentiment that this is starting to become a trend again. So,
well, I mean, the best example of that, I suppose, is Stranger Things, and how that woke a whole generation up to Metallica because of Eddie Munson and the whole Master of Puppets thing. And that can only be a good thing because, of course, Stranger Things being set what it was, you think of the songs that you hear as incidental music on that show. You know, there was Shout at the Devil on there, there was Wango Tango, there was Detroit Rock City, that would just play these incidental tunes. Of course, Running Up That Hill, Kate Bush played a major part in that series, but also, you know, a song like Master of Puppets, equally important. So maybe, you know, the Netflix generation, the more they watch of shows like Stranger Things and they hear a song like Master of Puppets, you go, well, where's that from? Oh, so they delve back into 1984, and not only do they find Master of Puppets, you know, maybe they go back a little further. They find Pyromania, or they find, I don't know, they go back still further. They find Deep Purple, Machine Head, and you never know what door leads to another. What they could do, of course, nowadays, go onto YouTube, type in Master of Puppets, and then the suggestion box sends them down this wormhole of all manner of great stuff. So maybe that's why the guys, you know, around your way in Texas are sort of, you know, maybe they're just discovering things because of, you know, the Upside Down and Eddie Munson and goodness knows what.
It's possible. And you can do the same thing on Spotify. Once, if you scroll down, it gives suggestions of bands that sound like the one that you looked up.
Yep.
You know, who knows who they're going to pick up on. I mean, that was the generation that we saw bands like Venom and Merciful Fate. I mean, you can go on and on and on. But we were watching, what was it called? Hot Tub Time Machine. And I know it's been out for a while, but
I remember that movie.
We decided we was going to watch it again because I forgot how it went. And you had bands like Poison on there. So, you know, maybe that's where the resurgence is coming from.
And you've just had that stadium tour with Crue, Def Leppard, Joan Jett, Poison, Classless Act that's just been around, you know, stadiums and open air places in the States. And you just never know. Somebody who, you know, bought a ticket for that because Poison, were they the ones who, Bret Michaels was on that reality show, you know, trying to himself up. You just never know that one person who bought a ticket goes to see, and through seeing Poison also gets to see, I don't know, Joan Jett, and gets really into Joan Jett stuff, and then gets into the Runaways, and suddenly doors are opening left, right, and center that will introduce the younger generation now to all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah, the one song that they played over and over in that movie was Home Sweet Home from Motley Crue. So look, there's Motley Crue. That was one of the harder bands that I started listening to when I got into junior high. And it's funny because you think of the bands like UFO and the Swede and all those. They were hard rocking bands, but Crue was metal. That was one of my introductions to metal.
Yeah, Crue. They had this really. They went glam for a bit, you know, because Theatre of Pain was a glammy look, and then Girls was back to more of a metal, you know, Sunset Strip thing, and then Dr. Feelgood. They had this big, huge Bob Rock produced sound. I mean, that they were clever in terms of how they, you know, Nicky, he's clever. He knows how to market and put Crue in at the forefront of everybody's minds, certainly with that original lineup and whatnot. I remember they came over here a couple of times. They played here on the Theatre of Pain tour, and Cheap Trick with the support. For UK audience, that's just a dream. You've got Motley Crue and you've got Cheap Trick on the same bill playing, you know, theatres like 2,000 seat theatres. And it was just a joy. And then the time they came back after that Crue, it was a 3-band bill. So Dr. Feelgood was a hit by this point, and you had Skid Row and White Lion.
Oh, yeah.
A 3-band bill. Great bill. Great. I mean, you know, we didn't see bills like that too often in the UK. You know, that normally happened in the States. You know, I got jealous about seeing that Kiss were on tour with, you know, Slaughter and Winger, or Slaughter and Faster Pussycat, and things like that. And those bills rarely, if ever, made it over to Europe. So we're hoping that Crue, Def Leppard, Poison thing can make it over to Europe in some form or other, maybe next year.
You know, talking about going down a rabbit hole, the first metal album that I bought on vinyl was Metal Health from Quiet Riot. And you know, they covered Slade.
That's right.
And so that got me into listening to Slade, and I started listening to some of their older stuff, and I fell in love with them. I really like Slade.
I was the same as you, because I for some reason that album came out. I would have been, that's 83, so I'd have been 14 when that album came out. And Come On Feel the Noise, the single it was a minor hit in the UK. Obviously, it was a first ever metal album to make #1 on Billboard, wasn't it? Metal Health back in 83. And they did the US Festival, which was another big thing for them. That day they played with Crue and Van Halen and things like that. But that made me go back and listen to Slade, and some Slade stuff. Oh boy, what a great songwriter Jim Lee was with Noddy Holder and some of those songs. How Does It Feel? It's one of the great ballads, one of the most beautifully written songs. So clever. You know, you think of the driving state thing, and Mama, We're All Crazy Now, and Goodbye to Jane, and Come On Feel the Noise. But a song like How Does It Feel? Oh man, you know, John, Paul, George, and Ringo wouldn't have minded writing that one. You know, it was such a cleverly written song. Yeah, we all love Slade. We're proud to have given them to the world.
It's funny. My cousin was over in New Zealand, and his mother had to have a surgery, and so they came back to the States so she could have it done. And he was in the airport, and he bought Hoodoo Guru's album on tape, and he gets back to the house and it's like, man, I just bought this tape. Let's listen to it. And so I'd never heard the Hoodoo Gurus before, and I was ready to hear it. He puts it on, and that song, the Chameleon song that Slade does, it was playing, and I'm like, dude, you got ripped off. That was Slade. That's not the Hoodoos.
Yeah. Well, it's great when people almost discover things by accident, isn't it? Or certainly in your mate's case, yeah, definitely by accident. Yes, and of course Slade were a massive influence on Kiss, the band I love. You know, Gene and Paul will tell you that how much they love that early Slade stuff, and Paul modeled his smashed mirror Ibanez guitar for the Dynasty tour. That whole idea came from Noddy's Top Hat, which had the mirrors around the top hat.
I did not know that.
The Slade lighting guy put the light on the top hat, and of course, you get shards of light popping off everywhere. Paul Stanley saw that and said to his guitar, right, I want a guitar that you know, you put a spotlight on that, light goes off everywhere. So Slade were the inspiration for so much.
And speaking of, I went and saw Whitesnake in concert back in '89, I believe it was. And Steve Vai was playing guitar for him because, you know, the other guitar player had hurt his hand.
Yep.
And he had this one guitar that had, I guess there were mirrors on them, but they were real small. And when you shine the light on it, it threw these sparkles all over the whole arena. Man, I'm going to tell you what, you're talking about a concert. That's when I fell in love with Steve Vai, because I'd never seen anybody play guitar like that before in my life. And mind you, I'm a Zappa nut. I think Zappa is like the best guitarist in the world. But
that was when I first heard Steve Vai doing Zappa stuff, when he was playing like Jazz Discharge Party Hats, which was the one where he's kind of playing guitar, trying to match Frank, Once Upon a Time down in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he's matching it on the guitar. You know, there was the man. Brilliant. We knew he was a genius before he joined up with Roth and did
Yankee Rose.
Yeah, Yankee Rose and that. But it's show business, Kyle. And people like Steve Vai and others and the rock bands we grew up loving, they knew the business of show. They didn't just walk on wearing the stuff they got out of bed wearing. They, they wanted to entertain us in more ways than just the music we love, but they wanted to add to it. So you got your value for money. And I'm big into that.
Yeah. Steve Vai was on that album, Them or Us, right? Is that the one that has Stevie Needs a Spanking?
Yeah, Stevie Spanking. Yeah. Because he was on that. He was on The Man from Utopia, was it? And Ship Arriving Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch. I think there were a few things he did. He wasn't in Zappa's band long, but he made his mark.
Yeah, I hated him being out there in just some short shorts on stage with Zappa. It looks so ridiculous.
Well,
but he could play.
The whole idea. Oh man, he can still play. You know, he's still making important music now, Steve Vai. And he's also started embracing his past a little more, which I quite like about him. He's actually, not embarrassed by his past. Some musicians can be a little reticent to, look over their shoulder at what they've done before, but not Steve. That's good to see.
Yeah. Was it Astoria that's over there in the UK?
It's no longer there, man. It's gone. There's a few venues in London that there's no Marquee Club anymore, and there's no Astoria Club. I saw Ace Frehley in the Astoria Club. You're going back now about 10, 15 years, but yeah, it's been knocked down for an underground station and building. So a lot of the the iconic club venues in London are no more.
And I've got the DVD of Steve playing live there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, that performance is undescribable. It's just, the guy is a god.
Well, he's otherworldly. There's people like him and Jeff Beck and others that I could listen to, because you just know it's them from one note, and there's no better compliment you can pay a guitar player and say it's them when you just hear them playing one note.
Oh yeah. Well, I know when he plays, like Rick Emmett, I always know when he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
There's Eddie Van Halen, of course. You can
Yes.
always tell Eddie. There's so many of those great guitarists. Lifeson and
Yeah, man.
oh my God, you go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I love music, man. That's my life outside of anything else. That's where I center around is music. And I think music is one of those things that's the key to bringing people together.
I agree. When I was a boy, I've got two older brothers, right? Phil's 5 years older than me and Robert's 7 years older. And Phil was really into the rock band. So by the time I was 7 or 8 years of age, he was 13 and getting into bands like Deep Purple and Rainbow and Thin Lizzy. So I had, at that age, you're pretty impressionable when you're 7, 8 years of age.
Yeah.
He sat me down and played me Rainbow Rising one day. He sat me in the lounge, put it on the record player and said, "You're going to listen to this because you need to hear this song Stargazer," or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, it did open doors. But you're right. It opened doors to my musical ability. I realized that I had musical ability because I was somehow able to copy, what I heard, in my ear. I could replicate it on a piano or on a guitar. So yeah, hearing songs for the first time that stick with it, and I will never tire of hearing Stargazer by Rainbow. I will never tire of hearing Still in Love with You off Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy or Highway Star, Deep Purple. These are formative songs in my youth. And the first side of Alive was the album that really changed my life, because that was an album I borrowed off my cousin, because my older brothers suddenly realized it wasn't so cool for their little brat of a kid brother to like the same music they did. So they went, go and find something else. So I borrowed Kiss Alive off my cousin, and I put that on. And those first 5 songs, Juice Strutter, Got to Choose, Hot Than Hell, Firehouse, I fell in love with that side 1 so much, Carl. I can't tell you. I was scared of playing sides 2, 3, and 4. I didn't play those 3 sides for weeks. I just played side 1 alone. I didn't even turn it over for side 2 because I was terrified that the rest of the album wouldn't match up to what I'd heard on that first, 12, 15 minutes of music. Of course, in the end, I smart, wise up and realize, turn it over, and sides 2, 3, and 4 were just as brilliant. And that, that was definitely, even more so than hearing Stargazer or Deep Purple, hearing Kiss Alive was a very, very important moment in my life in terms of what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be.
And here's the thing about music. You go to a concert, you're next to somebody, you may not have anything in common except for the band that's up there, the love for the band that's on stage. And for that 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, you're there, you're almost like best friends because you're just focusing in on the music. You can say the same thing when you go to a sporting event. You might be blue collar, the guy next to you is white collar, but you're basically friends because you're rooting for the same team.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm a sports commentator back here in the UK.
Yeah, I heard.
And it's funny, a lot of that partisan thing within you about the team that you love, it kind of drifts away a little because you don't get to see them as much because you're on the road watching other teams. So my team's not a successful team. It's not a big English Premier League side. But the few times that we've had success, yeah, you share in it with everybody, regardless of race, color, creed,
Exactly.
background. It's a beautiful thing. So it was 11 years ago that my team actually won a major trophy in this country. And, you know, there were, I don't know, 30,000 people from our city who went to Wembley Stadium to watch the game that we won and won the trophy. And the unifying effect that it has, it's glorious. You can't manufacture it, can you? And the same with a concert. You can't manufacture that shared joy. And being a fan of bands like Kiss and Rush, and that have introduced me to so many great friends who are going to be best friends of mine to the day I'm no longer on this earth, because they mean something to me. And there's a shared experience that we've had, whether we've gone to see Kiss in Paris or whether we've, you know, gone to see Kiss in Copenhagen or wherever it may be. There's that shared joy of experiencing something in a different country that you can't replicate that.
Gosh, I wished I could have experienced that joy and that love during Live Aid, especially when you had bands that come together that hadn't been together for a while. And you know, you had the reunion, Black Sabbath and Genesis and all these other bands. Oh my God!
I went to the Sabbath reunion, the first one when Bill was still playing drums, and that was a pretty iconic moment because, of course, they did 2 nights in Birmingham at the NEC Arena. I went to both nights. I remember there was a seat cushion fight one night. The people at the NEC Arena, they'd foolishly put removable seat covers on all the seats. And during Children of the Grave, it was just mental. They were just seat covers going everywhere. Ozzy loved it, of course, because he's busy like throwing buckets of water on people in the front and, you know, practically throwing custard pies in people's faces like Krusty the Clown. But he was loving watching all these. It was just like watching, you know, like birds, you know, in the air, that's that murmur of birds that you see in the sky sometimes when they're all following each other, just cushion covers going everywhere, mental. But yeah, seeing moments like that Sabbath reunion, whoa, that you knew you were present at something that was pretty important.
You're part of history.
Yeah, exactly. And they delivered that night. Those 2 nights, my God, they were great nights. You know, you were hearing songs that you never thought you'd hear played live, like, you know, Behind the Wall of Sleep or Electric Funeral, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, never mind the well-known classics, but boy, oh boy, those were special nights.
I mean, thanks to Bob Geldof, man. That was
Live Aid. I mean, you know, we were sat in our lounge, and I remember it was tea time, UK early evening time. Sorry, I'm getting a bit too colloquial there. Early evening, like so 5:30, 5:40 in the evening. That's when Queen came on, and they couldn't have been better timed because, you know, people who might have been out for the day were just coming in, settling down for an evening meal. They got Live Aid on the BBC, and Queen came on and did that 20-minute set, and that relaunched them as much in America as anything else. Because I think Hollywood Records then got behind Queen, and suddenly album sales went gangbusters.
Yeah.
Over in the States, and they followed it with A Kind of Magic, of course, the year after. And I got to see one of the final shows that Queen did at Wembley that next year, at the year after Live Aid, when they did some shows at Wembley Stadium. I would only have been 17, maybe. You get to see Queen and Freddie. And all the stories you've heard about Freddie are true. He could make anybody right at the back of an arena feel like they were in the front row with him. He was a freak of nature as a frontman, absolute freak of nature.
He's by far my favorite vocalist of all rock music. There's something about him that was, like you said, his magic. It's freakishly undescribable how much of an entertainer and singer and a songwriter. Just something about that guy.
He repels some people. You know, some people can't. Well, if they never hear Bohemian Rhapsody again, it's going to be too soon for some people. You know, and that's fine. You know, each to their own. But I can listen. There's an album, Sheer Heart Attacks, my favorite Queen album. I can listen to that time and again, because the variety of music, you got metal with like Stone Cold Crazy, you got something more spaced out like She Makes Me, you got kind of a vaudeville song with Big Bad Leroy Brown, you got more straight ahead rock stuff with Brighton Rock and Now I'm Here, Killer Queen, which was so eclectic. That album's chock full of just some brilliant songs of all sorts of different genres, but it all worked. You know, it's one band, it's four guys, it's 8-9 different styles in one record, but it works. It binds together somehow.
Oh yeah. Man, that's a whole nother podcast. I could talk about Queen, any of these bands for hours, because that's how much I love this music.
Well, you know, I could talk about Kiss for a few hours, but you don't want that necessarily. Or you shitless about Kiss, but there you go. You were lucky because, you know, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s in the UK, no Kiss information, next to no Kiss information. You guys had 16, you had Cream, you had Hit Parader, you had all the music magazines that were wall-to-wall Kiss, particularly from like 76 to 79. You could not avoid them, Kiss, in the States. In the UK, next to nothing. And it was only the non-makeup era when Kiss actually started getting a bit of notoriety in the UK. It's so strange. They just they never clicked over here. They came over here in 76 first, and that was when punk was just hitting, and punk bands lumped Kiss in with the prog bands and said they're the enemy, and that didn't help Kiss in some regards. You know, that was their decision, you know, to lump Kiss in with that. But I'm always jealous of American folks of my sort of generation who could, you know, watch, you know, Kiss, go see Kiss on the Dynasty tour and see that massive stage, or go to the Love Gun tour, or, you know, see all the stuff that they did on TV around that time. We ended up getting drip-fed things. There was an episode of Benson. Remember Benson?
Yes, I do.
There was an episode of Benson where the little girl, Katie, wanted to go to a Kiss concert. And that was, I remember it was shown on a Sunday lunchtime in the UK, Benson. And it was probably about a year or two behind when the States saw it first. But I remember going, they've just mentioned Kiss on the television. And they never mentioned Kiss. So, you know, even something as which you would regard as being as, you know, that doesn't matter. That, to me, Kiss getting mentioned on Benson on a US sitcom, flipping heck. we only had 3 TV channels in the UK at that time. 3.
Yeah.
So, you know, any mention of Kiss at any point was just like gold dust.
Yeah, I was 6 years old when I first heard Kiss, and my mother found out and she flipped out. And there was a little drive-in store behind our house, so I would sneak around there, and it was 25 to 50 cents, whatever it was, to buy the little bubblegum cards. So I kept going over there until finally I got the whole complete set. You know, you could flip it over and make a poster, or you could see just them on stage or whatever the picture was. And so I hid them. My mom found them. And when she did, she about had a heart attack. She threw them out. And that was so disheartening for me. And I finally got the set again some years ago. Well, it was a few years back, and it ended up costing me $60 or whatever to get the whole set. But I probably got the whole thing for, I don't know, less than $10. I know. Just
was that the Satanist thing then? Was that your mum's problem? Was it the kids in the service of Satan? And
Knights in Satan service.
Yeah. That all that stuff never made it over here somehow. But yeah, you probably weren't alone then in that regard. There were lots of other American kids like you who suffered the same fate.
I mean,
I
loved Kiss so much, and it wasn't until I got into my 20s when I finally got to go to a concert. So I saw them a couple of times, and then about 12 years ago, some guy had barreled into the back of my truck, and when the insurance company sent me the check, I didn't go get my truck fixed. I got tickets to go see Kiss, but I got the backstage, the whole 9 yards, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And mind you, I had to travel from Houston to Dallas, which I think it was like 4-hour drive, something like that. But I got there, went backstage. It's a soccer stadium, and they were in the locker room. They had us lined up, and we got to wait until they came around, but they come by, that you had a little poster or whatever, and they would sign it for you, and you got to shake hands with them and say something real quick.
Sure.
Only time in my life I'd ever been nervous meeting somebody was when Gene Simmons walked up, and I'm trying to hold my camera, and I'm doing like my hand shaking and everything, but it's a moment I will never forget. Finally got to meet my favorite band, Kiss.
Yep. They say never meet your heroes. It's a load of crap. Meet your heroes, folks. They don't always let you down. I've been lucky enough to meet Gene and Paul, and Bruce Kulick I've met, and you could not wish to meet nicer folks than those guys. And that just accentuates your love for the band when you meet them and they turn out to be gentlemen, and they turn out to be, the best kind of people to speak with and to break bread with. Yeah, that just that vindicates your decision somehow. You think, see, I knew I was right to be into this band since I was 10 years of age. I knew it. I knew I was right. And my mum and dad weren't as scared of Kiss as your mum clearly was when she saw the bubblegum cards. I think my mum and dad just looked at me, dear, okay, well, whatever he wants to do, They weren't terrified that I was going to, run off and join a satanic cult or anything like that. In fact, they took me to my first Kiss concert, because my first ever concert was Kiss in 1983. So the makeup had just come off, actually, and they were touring Lick It Up.
Yeah.
Vinnie Vincent was on guitar for that short period of time. So they played this place in about 40 minutes north of Birmingham, a place called Stafford, right?
Mm-hmm.
In those days, so we're going back to 1983, right? There weren't many purpose-built arenas like you've always had, in arena rock since the 70s in the States. In the 80s, there was nothing. There was what's now known as Wembley Arena. It was known as the Empire Pool back then at Wembley. But apart from that, there were no purpose-built arenas. So Stafford Bingley Hall was a place that a lot of American bands used. Rush, yes, British band, of course. Boston played there, the Eagles. And it was a cowshed. It was an agricultural showground, right? It was a massive sort of kind of aircraft hangar type place where they did cow auctions.
Wow.
During the day. And then, they'd be given over to bands for touring. It smelled of cow shit. Right? So you got this venue, Stafford Bingley Hall, this mix in the air of cow shit and patchouli oil that all the guys had on, the smell of their, denim jackets. And that's what I thought. My mum and dad took me up there with a couple of friends of mine. They dropped us off outside the cowshed. They went off to go and have dinner somewhere and came to pick us up at the end of the night. Bearing in mind, I'm 15, just turned 15 at this point. And mum said, we'll wait here where we dropped you off. You come and find us. So they came back and they could hear Black Diamond, I think, or, coming out the cowshed and this unholy racket. And then the doors opened as people left, and there were 7,000 people who looked just like me walking towards where my mum and dad were parked. And of course, my mum flips, oh my God, where's my son? Thinking I was gone forever. So I have to thank my mum and dad. At least they indulged me. They let me, enjoy the music that I loved, and they encouraged it to a degree. They weren't crazy about Kiss, but they didn't ban me from listening to them either.
My mom listened to John Denver and Peter, Paul, and Mary, so you can imagine when my music came along.
My mum and dad loved the Carpenters, right? They were big into the Carpenters and ABBA, and there was a British singer-songwriter called Jerry Rafferty who was big in the UK. Around about the turn of the 80s. Yeah, City to City was a great album. So actually, those albums and those artists, they inform my musicality as well. Some of the harmonies you hear on this album, there'll be a little bit of pinching from the harmonies that Jerry Rafferty liked to use, or the Carpenters like to use, or ABBA. I'm a sucker for a good bit of harmony vocals. So yeah, even the bands that my mum and dad like listening to, I can still listen to the Carpenters now and get all here's Solitaire, and it sets me off every time because it's just such a. I know Karen Carpenter wasn't happy with her version of it, but I don't. She slayed that version.
She could sing. I mean, she was awesome.
Boy. Well, she had a voice, and she was a great drummer too. Man alive,
Yeah.
she played drums. She was a brilliant drummer. Buddy Rich, she was a real talent. But the true talent was in the voice. I mean, that's a voice for all time. That.
Oh, that's no lie, man. So, do you have a website?
I do. If people go to iandanter.co.uk, you can order all my albums, including the new one, Rule of Three, through CD, through that website. And there's details on there about how I came to be and all the daft things I've done, be it, broadcasting or sports commentary or radio, things like that. So yeah, iandanter.co.uk. And if people want to follow me on social media, and people use Twitter, they can follow me at TalkDance, TalkDants.
I'm gonna put those links in the description so people can find it easy.
Thanks, man.
Before we go, I wanted to leave something for the audience that might inspire them. What's been the biggest hurdle you've ever had in your life?
The biggest hurdle, I think, being the self-belief is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned, like, when I was a lad, I had delusions of grandeur about being a rock star. And of course, it didn't happen for me. I didn't make it, to use that phrase. But regardless of that, the journey that I went on to try and make it helped me to shape the person who I came to be. And it gets you over hurdles of, how to treat people and how to be sociable, and, the social skills. And it made me a little bit fearless as well, perhaps, in that, all right, I tried this, I failed, it hasn't killed me. And not too long after abandoning my hopes of being a rock star, I got to work in radio. I got a chance to work in UK in broadcasting, which to a degree fell into my lap. But when the opportunity comes your way, that's when the hard work starts. Sometimes an opportunity falls into your lap completely by chance. But in order to maintain that opportunity and make it work for you, you've got to work at it. I worked at being in a hard rock band, and all right, it didn't work for me, but I loved the journey that I went on. And it just so happened that the next thing I turned my hand to, I've been doing it for over 20 years now. And just that self-belief, Carl, that things may come along to try and put you in your place somehow. Not literally, not like somebody, just that feeling as though, oh, all right, what's my purpose? What am I here for? And you might get disheartened, but keep believing in your own strengths and concentrating on those, and not worrying about the things that you're not so good at, and make the good stuff work for you. That's probably one thing I've learned.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, man. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you nothing but success.
Thank you so much.
Again, I really enjoyed the album. I'm highly recommending it. And
Me too.
I know you are. Well, Billy sends me different artists, and he lets me listen to the music and lets me decide who's going to be on the show and who's not. And I only pick the people that I really, really enjoy listening to. So
well, that's great, man. Thank you so much. Well, it's as with all these things, all the albums I've done, it's a labor of love. It's done because of the love of the music, and because of the love of that desire to, write great songs, and, capture little moments in your head and stick them down for all to hear. So if it hits home with one person or 1,000, or it doesn't matter. If it hits home with one person, that's enough for me. So if that music's connected with you, then my work here is done.
Oh, well, I thank you for making that album for me then.
No problem. Give me 3 years, I'll make you another one.
Well, you should feel privileged that you made my list at all. So.
I should. Yeah, maybe I should. I'm not being. I should. We're not worthy. I'm not being differential enough, am I? Really? No. I'm more appreciative of what you've done for me. But no, thank you for your appreciation of it, because it's. It feels good to know that this music can go the other side of the Atlantic and find a home. So that's great. That's great.
Well, whenever the next album comes out, you got to get in touch with me. I'd love to have you back on so we could talk about it.
Oh, no worries, Carl. I will do, man.
And I also want to tell y'all out there how much I appreciate you. If you stop by the channel, this is your first time, I can't say thank you enough. And I hope you'll come back. Please subscribe. For those of you who are regular, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this at all. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
Memories take shape, but none of them are mine. Just all the things I can't
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network